On Thursday, state and municipal officials recognized the Louisa Swain Federal Building with a ceremony.
Today they dedicated the Louisa Swain Federal Building and celebrated not only Wyoming's history, but women as well.
Wyoming has a long history of equality, and Swain is mostly the reason why.
For us in Wyoming, it's just something to be proud of. You know, thinking about the people who came before us, they saw a vision of equality, you know, and they voted to do that. A group of men voted to give women the right to vote, the first in the country, and I just think that's special.
She was the first woman to vote 50 years before the 19th Amendment.
I think it also stands as a marker that we should continue to do the best that we can to make sure that we live up to being the equality state.
This pioneer blazed a path for women's rights to have money, to own land, sit on a jury, keep their children, and sit in office.
Wyoming should acknowledge its past, but use it as a springboard to continue to advance women's rights. It's important that this state continue to lead in that area.
The Wyoming Territorial Legislature gave women these rights in 1869. And when Washington, D.C. asked Wyoming to repeal this right to join the federal union,
the legislature said, representatives of the legislature said, we will remain out of the union 100 years before we come in without the women.
Wyoming women led in the past, lead today, and will forge new frontiers in our future.
This federal building is now open to the public in Cheyenne, Wyoming. For Wyoming News Now, I'm Valeria Fugate.
Tuesday morning, a crowd of concerned parents, legislators, educators, and speakers gathered at Little America to discuss the over-sexualization of children in education. Concerns over explicit books, gender identity courses, and exposure to trans topics became a hotbed of discussion. Educators discussed parents' rights in deciding what their children learn in their schools.
A parent should have the right to determine what their children are exposed to.
And they pushed back against what they said was an ever-increasing national narrative of LGBTQ materials and over-sexualizing of minors.
Hearing constantly from the parents on this, and then again watching the national trends across the country, and my own convictions about education. The purpose of education is to learn to think, and we're getting away from that. It's becoming more ideological. There's more indoctrination.
One of the speakers said we should abolish the Department of Education.
You want to have some kind of central authority to keep it all together and to be sure that every child has the same opportunity as every other child. Equity and equality are very important, and that's the function of the Department of Education.
Legislators said the next step looks like amending parental rights legislation, our statute exemptions, and our Constitution.
We want a quality education without all the other, how do you even put a word around it, without all the other stuff.
A local mom says we need to keep indoctrination out of education and schools.
That we can teach what we want at home and be still loving and inclusive, but without promoting our personal beliefs.
Parents always have the option of what their kids learn. If they want to opt their children out from certain materials, they have every right to do that. What they cannot do is to do that for everybody else's children.
Misinformation, disinformation, and malinformation, or MDM, has been a hot topic during recent elections.
Certainly the problems with misinformation that is out there is that people don't trust government.
MDM is political information that is false, deliberately misleading, or factual but out of context. Officials say this happens for political positioning, but historically not to this magnitude.
That erodes our trust and our representation, and erodes our trust in our country, and it just erodes just the fabric of our democracy.
Today, we see it in bipartisan platforms on social media and editorial news to increase voter turnout.
It's to evoke some emotional response. Facts are boring. They're very black and white. And so if the information you're reading is really triggering you, then it's gone beyond just a fact.
Officials say by casting doubt, MDM chips away at the legitimacy and faith in elections, facts, and law.
Those that are creating, this information and deliberately trying to mislead and cause distrust in the process, really, shame on them. because they are literally domestic terrorists.
Schoen says the best way to debunk conspiracy is to get involved, volunteering for elections and learning about its security firsthand.
It's getting to know people in positions that all of the doubt and misinformation is targeted against.
Schoen says ballot machines are not hooked up to the internet and are tested by counting 1 million ballots accurately before they go out publicly. Paper ballots are counted against poll books and tabulators several times during elections, so ballots cannot go missing. Officials say graceful concession has to come back into fair play and elections.
We all want the same things. It's just how we achieve that. And that's where the debate should be. You know, what's the avenue to our common goal as opposed to, you know, is this person good or evil?
As trans issues cross the legislature, lawmakers and experts discuss the Student Eligibility Interscholastic Sports Bill. This bill looks to separate athletes by biological gender, according to lawmakers, preventing an unfair advantage. It recently received $1.1 million in funding from appropriations for expected litigation. It now heads to the Revenue Committee for review. Former athlete, coach, and current lawmaker weighs in.
We've had some incidences already where some girls have lost their places on the podium based on having to deal with trans athletes. So it's not me being mean. It's not anyone being, trying to be exclusive. We're just trying to say the girls have fought hard and long, 50 years for Title IX. We want to continue to keep those levels of law in place for our girls.
And human rights experts say that advantage isn't true.
I think that when we pass bad legislation, we only hurt youth and we only tell youth that, we're going to other you, we're going to make you feel different and separate. What we need to be doing is looking at ways we can support our youth and make sure our youth have positive outcomes and are feeling engaged in their community.
And advocates respond to further division.
Some folks have suggested, why don't we just set up a third category? And the Supreme Court over and over and the American people have said, separate is never equal.
The hot-button bills of Life is a Human Right Act and the Prohibiting Chemical Abortions bill were heard today and voted on concurrence. This is where both chambers agree and sign off on the final drafts of the bill. The Senate made some amendments to the Life is a Human Right Act bill, which included viability, medical treatments, miscarriages, and ectopic pregnancies, and would require reporting for incest or rape to law enforcement to access abortions. Pro-life advocates are happy this over 2-year-long journey is crossing the finish line.
The 14th Amendment guarantees a right to life, and preborn children are human beings. And so essentially what House Bill 152 and House Bill 109 that have been passed by both chambers does is confirm that Wyoming believes preborn children have a right to life.
Lawmakers did strip out state or third-party intervention litigation. This bill also becomes effective immediately upon the governor's signature, according to lawmakers. Pro-life advocates say this shows abortion is not health care.
That's an inalienable right, and so I really struggle with the idea that health care is the ending of another life.
Critics say this bill runs against constitutionality and will face immediate litigation, costing taxpayers more than just money.
It's going to cost women health care. It's going to cost some women the ability to go to the doctor when they're in a miscarriage and be able to get the services that they need because doctors are going to be afraid to treat them. It's going to cost some women their lives.
Saying these bills are not what Wyoming's about.
This is the equality state, and this is a state that has prided itself on this live and let live ideology, and this legislation this year that has attacked women is an attack on that ideology, and it's an attack on democracy, and I think it flies in the face of the state of Wyoming. We should all be offended.
What started out as a Wyoming father helping out his stepson turned out to help 3 local boys compete on the international stage.
Local Wyomingite Emmanuel Waddy got into jiu-jitsu almost 13 years ago to help his stepson. With some encouragement from his mom, they steered him towards self-defense, and Waddy joined in to support him. From that point on, Waddy was hooked, and eventually he started his own school.
I wanted to bring kids that option, that chance to see what is out there, and they can branch out. So yeah, I believe jiu-jitsu has way more to offer.
Madhouse Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu opened in Cheyenne 3.5 years ago. Most students come to his school wanting more confidence.
This place in itself has changed our lives for the better. I don't think I've ever made a better decision than being here and being a part of it.
Cale Henderson was getting badly bullied in 7th grade when his dad had had enough. The transformation Rick saw was amazing, and the bully situation kind of fixed itself during one competition.
One of the kids that was bullying him was in the audience watching him fight. And after that, school year started and they wouldn't come near him, wouldn't even try.
3 local students wanted to take their competition to the next level.
One thing I'm mainly wanting to do is try to get gold in it or win every single match.
In July, these boys will be competing in the IBJJF Pan American Kids Jiu-Jitsu competition in Florida.
I want to go down there and do my best and test myself and see how good I am, really. It's going to get me better and see what I could do and what I need to get better at.
This organization hosts the biggest Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu competitions in the world.
I'm going to be the first 100% Wyoming to be in that tournament. I'm looking most forward to winning that gold medal to prove that Wyoming is really good.
Bringing kids in from all over the world to compete.
To see them smile and succeed in something that they thought they would never have. That self-gratification, that I did it moment, there's nothing like it.
As these boys move from beginner to confident competitors, we are wishing them the best of luck in their tournament. For Wyoming News Now, I'm Valeria Fugate.
According to FE Warren officers, 4 military families of color have transferred out of the state. The reason? These service members and their children face repeated racial discrimination from the community, including schoolmates. Military authorities spoke up and say the diversity our military brings is a source of strength in Wyoming.
Great communities are diverse. Great communities celebrate everybody that they have together with them. Great communities accept one another, and they don't tolerate behavior like this.
Barrington says this racism affects who stays, who chooses to come, and who invests in our city and our state. The military is our largest employer with over $400 million in payroll.
Our nuclear mission here is vital. I need talented people who can come to work. So when we start impacting our ability to bring in top talent, that is a strategic problem.
Governor Mark Gordon says racism weakens Wyoming.
It is troubling to me that we have soldiers that are protecting our very rights, that are feeling uncomfortable living here. And when we have Russia rattling sabers and China doing all that it's doing overseas, we should feel strongly about making sure that our military feels safe here and that they also know that Wyoming supports them 100%.
Air Force staff broke their silence in January when these ongoing issues came to a head. Officials say it got so bad, a serviceman's daughter became suicidal and another family's son was fined for fighting when racially berated. The Wyoming Prescriptive Drug Transparency Act, created during the last legislative session, was meant to stabilize the pharmacy industry and keep community pharmacies open. But pharmacy experts claim the bill was gutted by Governor Mark Gordon with line vetoes before it was signed, maintaining a dysfunctional industry status quo.
He took out pretty much all of the protections that were in the bill that would help those pharmacies stay open and increase that access to care. He also took out anything that would create health savings for the patients or the health plans.
Gordon said in a statement the burden placed on small business pharmacies was great and that the bill had important policy changes for rural independent pharmacists, impacting Wyoming's prescription costs in healthcare and for consumers. Gordon also signed a directive for the Wyoming Department of Administration and Information to increase the amount of dispensing fee claims for independent pharmacists that participate in Wyoming's state employees and officials group insurance program. But pharmacy leaders say the change doesn't address the lack of transparency costs for insurance or drugs from PBMs, and that should be a red flag to the public.
Over 70% of my members felt we needed to be involved in this issue, we needed disclosure, and we needed a level playing field. And that's what we don't have. That's what Senate File 151 would have done. And unfortunately, the governor line item all the reforms out of the bill.
Experts say that reforms need to happen before medical deserts in Wyoming grow.
Health costs will probably continue to increase, and we will probably continue to lose small pharmacies, unfortunately. We've lost 2 small pharmacies in Wyoming in the last 6 months up in the Gillette community.
Pharmacy experts say rural communities travel up to 70 miles to national stores for their pharmaceuticals, and that the economic impact means a $185 million loss in Wyoming's economy annually. I'm Valeria Fugate, Wyoming News Now. According to FE Warren officers, 4 military families of color have transferred out of the state. The reason? These service members and their children face repeated racial discrimination from the community, including schoolmates. Military authorities spoke up and say the diversity our military brings is a source of strength in Wyoming.
Great communities are diverse. Great communities celebrate everybody that they have together with them. Great communities accept one another, and they don't tolerate behavior like this.
Barrington says this racism affects who stays, who chooses to come, and who invests in our city and our state. The military is our largest employer with over $400 million in payroll.
Our nuclear mission here is vital. I need talented people who can come to work. So when we start impacting our ability to bring in top talent, that is a strategic problem.
Governor Mark Gordon says racism weakens Wyoming.
It is troubling to me that we have soldiers that are protecting our very rights, that are feeling uncomfortable living here. And when we have Russia rattling sabers and China doing all that it's doing overseas, we should feel strongly about making sure that our military feels safe here and that they also know that Wyoming supports them. 100%.
Air Force staff broke their silence in January when these ongoing issues came to a head. Officials say it got so bad, a serviceman's daughter became suicidal and another family's son was fined for fighting when racially berated.